1 year. It's been 1 year since we last worshiped together on Sunday morning in the sanctuary meeting house. 365 days since our leadership held an emergency meeting about whether to close the building as other churches had already done. It's easy to look back over the past year and list all that we have lost. 530,000 people have died in the U.S. alone, and the lives of those who love them will never return to normal. Life events like weddings and anniversaries and graduations and the birth of babies that can never be recaptured. Even remembering our deceased loved ones and holding each other in our grief was taken from us. It's been a challenging year. And yet, there are blessings among the grief and lessons amidst the challenges we have faced. As Paul writes in the first book of Thessalonians, chapter 5, verses 16 through 18, and I quote, "Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." We are not called to look for hardship, but neither are we to lose faith when hardship arrives, as it will in every lifetime. I read those words to be that it is the rejoicing and new life that is God's will for us, not the hardship. And so I asked a few of our video readers this question: what gift and or blessings have you personally received during this time of pandemic? And here is what they said.
What I learned on my summer vacation. Oh wait, that's not right. I meant to say what I learned and gained during the pandemic. It was no vacation, that's for sure. I appreciate that Reverend Carrie has encouraged us to consider what we gained or learned over the last year. So here goes. I learned how important it is to try to be in the moment. I read how some people use the word now as a mantra for their meditation. This is a way to remind your brain to stay here, to not wander off to yesterday or tomorrow. As it became clear that our isolation was going to continue for a long time, I learned to focus on today and not on what tomorrow might bring. When my mind became overwhelmed with worry and concern over what was happening, this sometimes meant taking life 1 minute at a time, not 1 day at a time. I came to understand that my faith journey has always been preparing me for challenges such as this, a different way to strengthen my belief and trust in God. I now much better understand that we are a church, no matter what. Buildings and in-person services do not make us FCC or Christians. Our actions, outreach, and beliefs do. I learned that I am able to focus on being joyful, even in the midst of scary things happening around me. As I do each year, I picked a word to focus on in 2021. That word was rejoice, a reminder to carry this lesson with me all year. In an effort to get out of the house, I walked the neighborhood whenever possible. Sometimes I would begin to feel sad because I was alone and not walking with a friend. But then I was reminded that I am not alone, that God walks with me everywhere, and I felt less lonely. I learned that if you console yourself with cakes and cookies and such, you will pay for it in the form of extra pounds that are hard to lose. But then I learned that I can start to turn that around, and God is with me in that too. Also, I was reminded that I married the right person, as we were able to put up with each other when we were seeing no one else for weeks at a time. And that sometimes you need to move the ordinary weekday dinner into the dining room, light candles, put on your special jewelry, get out the china, and feel like you are at a restaurant. And if you are with the right person, he will understand your need to do that. Every week, I was reminded to be grateful that the minister, staff, and volunteers at FCCRO are sent from heaven above to keep us all in worship, even when we are apart. Thank you all.
What have I learned through this pandemic? That we still need each other. Even with isolation or quarantine, we reach out to each other. I know this personally. We've made contact by phone and by mail, which in the past we might have taken for granted. In spite of the quarantine, we support and help one another. Those spur of the moment phone calls, the text messages, the emails can help more than the caller or sender might realize. We have still managed to do the right thing with helping others, such as the pantry work, the Thanksgiving project, and helping with the shelters. We have the work of the prayer group and the pastoral care ministers. The deacons invented new ways to bring Advent and Lent to us. Our boards are still working via Zoom. The point is, we're persevering in the Lord's name. Our Christmas music was still there, and this time we had the chance to remember events and music of the past. Thank you, Melissa and Dave, for putting that together. The children still had their pageant, but in a different way, a new way, and it was fun. Thank you, Tina, for doing this for our kids. The Christmas Eve carol singing in the parking lot was very special because it was a chance to gather safely. Just so our warm weather worship in the parking lot. It was good to see that we're still family, and we need and want to see each other. It says in the Gospel of Matthew, "For where 2 or 3 gather together in my name, I am there with you." We took too much for granted being physically together to worship. Now we know it's a precious thing to sit together to pray, sing, and think about the message of the day. We've had to reinvent the gathering with things such as Zoom coffee hours and YouTube worship. The point is, we are still gathering, at least 2 or 3, in His name.
Hello. As many of you know, our son-in-law Adam is active duty in the Navy. He and our daughter Meredith were living in Japan last year. His ship did not have any COVID cases, so he was not allowed off the ship, even in his home port. Meredith, standing on the dock looking at him, said, "Forget this. I'm not staying in Japan with a 3-month-old infant and no help," and did what many do, went home to mom and dad. Despite the bad press COVID has had, there are some positives. We had the joy of 4.5 months of living with our first grandchild. I will not say that the whole time was perfect, but our little cocoon was mostly happy times. Bob would do a 90-minute walk, pushing the stroller with a sleeping baby up and down the streets in our neighborhood. We would sit on our porch with the baby or let him attempt to crawl on the grass and wave to all the walkers who came by. We spoke with our neighbors more than we ever have before. Even walking this past fall and winter, people passing would ask me how my grandchild was. This year of COVID has had some periods of pain and isolation, but also great joy. The spring and summer with our daughter and grandson was a gift that we would not have had any other time.
This past year has taught us that we can do without a lot of the things that we've always taken for granted. And it's also taught us to appreciate and maybe get a little creative with those things that we're still able to do.
For example, we've always enjoyed cooking together, but being unable to go to any restaurants and stuff it's forced us to go to a whole new level. For example, who would have known I would have fallen in love with an air fryer, and more importantly, that it makes a perfect grilled cheese.
And I must say, there are a lot of other things that turned up on our menu that would not have but for this pandemic. We've also found some new hobbies during the pandemic. I, for one, have perfected the art of doing jigsaw puzzles, and I've risen to a new level in my Sudokus.
And I have had the opportunity to attack something that's been on my bucket list for a long, long time, and that is I am struggling to learn how to play the guitar.
You're not struggling. You're doing great.
You're being kind.
And while we really miss our large family gatherings, we've been able to have a lot more one-on-one time with our kids and our grandson, thanks to the wonders of FaceTime and Zoom.
Yeah, that allows us no distractions at all. Pure one-on-one time, especially with Daniel.
Yeah, it's really special. But the biggest blessing is that we've been able to spend the winter here in South Carolina, which in and of itself is a blessing. But we've also been able to go to our church every Sunday. It's really great to see Carrie and all the readers and Melissa and Dave and Karen and all the other musicians, and especially some of those musicians and friends who we've lost, like Ken Snow and Bob Branch. It's wonderful to hear them. It's also great singing along with the hymns and following along with the service. So we really, really appreciate that. And above all, I guess this past year has taught us that even if we can't be together physically as a church, we can still be a church, and we are. And we thank all for that. Thank you.
It's hard to believe that we have been living in this pandemic lockdown for a year now. When Reverend Carrie asked me to recount some of the good that has come from this tragedy, it reminded me of one of my favorite childhood books, Fortunately, Unfortunately by Remy Charlotte. In it, for every unfortunate thing that happens to the hero Ned, a good piece of fortune occurs to counteract his bad luck. This year has felt like that book to me. To start, I lost my job just as the pandemic hit. But my company still paid me a severance for months, so I didn't have to worry about income right away. At the same time, my mom had a serious fall and subsequent medical issues. But because I wasn't working, I had the time to be a caregiver and was able to spend so much quality time with her before she left us in October. The pandemic also forced my son to finish middle school and start high school from home, and that forced me to relearn algebra and history. But working together with him on his schoolwork has brought us closer together, mostly. And we had time to play basketball and tennis almost every afternoon last summer, time I never would have had if he was in school and I was at the office. COVID ended our in-person Sunday services and made the church scramble to put the service online. But I had learned how to make a video for one of Adrian's school projects, so I decided to volunteer my services to see if I could help the church go online. It hasn't always been easy, and it hasn't always been perfect, but I've learned a lot by doing it. More importantly, it has led me to get to know some very wonderful people in our church. Reverend Carrie, Dave Meinhardt, Melissa, Tina, and all the scripture readers, and I feel very blessed for that. Sadly, the pandemic has unfortunately stripped away the social safety net from so many people in this country. Fortunately, the pandemic has also provided me the time and the opportunity to help others by working at organizations like the Welcome Inn, Beacon of Hope Food Pantry, Blessings in a Backpack, and others. And those groups have introduced me to so many selfless and caring people that I am now proud to call my friends. To sum up, there will always be unfortunate events beyond our control that will wreak havoc on our lives. It takes courage to see them instead as opportunities and to create better fortune. And God can help you to find that courage. So, be like Ned and just remember that for every unfortunately, there is a fortunately waiting just around the corner.
So today, the day that I'm actually recording this video, is the same day 1 year ago that the first cases of COVID were reported in Michigan. And I remember that day just like it was yesterday. It was definitely the last normal day that I had and the girls had for sure. So this day 1 year ago, it was primary day and Julia didn't have school. So I piled the kids, both of them, in my car, went and voted, and then went on to church in Royal Oak from Rochester Hills. And Evie had preschool that afternoon, so she went to preschool. And after preschool, we went and got some dinner and then came back to church because it was also board meeting night. We had boards and then went home, put the girls to bed, sat down, and found out about those first cases. And I went to bed not really sure what to expect or what to think. Well, as it turns out, the next night, the school texted saying that the girls, that Julia was off of school for the rest of the week. And then not 2 days later, we got the text saying that school was canceled indefinitely in person. And as it turned out there, Julia never went back to school in person that year. And that Tuesday was the last time Evie saw her preschool teacher. So this is the beginning of what I like to call the Twilight Zone. That was what it was like for me and for the girls. There were so many parts of this last year that were difficult, that were scary, and just downright unbelievable. I mean, I couldn't believe this was happening almost every day. I just kind of sat here and thought, how can this be? How can this be actually happening? However, through all of that adversity that we faced, I found another level of strength and perseverance that I didn't know I had in me. And it was kind of, at first I had no idea what to expect, but just as I had done when I became a mother, and then again when I became a single mother a few years later, I learned and then I grew. And I finally fully appreciated that you truly never can know what tomorrow will bring. So to live in the present and appreciate what's in the present. I most definitely found blessings this year that I didn't even know I was looking for. The curriculum I've been teaching to the kids, I'm pretty sure has made me feel closer to God, and I've been learning as much or more as the kids who've been watching my videos are learning. So that has been pretty awesome. But most of all, I have been able to watch my girls grow and take everything in stride, adapt, all of those things that, little kids, they can do, and we see them do all the time, but they really had to do this year. They really had to adapt. We haven't been so crazy as we were before the pandemic, and so I have been able to actually enjoy watching them grow and change. And the pause, though it went on so much longer than we expected, I truly believe it was needed in so many ways. So I pray that when we all get back to normal, that we can appreciate some of that slowness that we had in this last year and not forget to continue that in some ways. And I pray that everyone has found some silver lining through all of this, no matter how small.
For me, it is a rare thing for a minister / pastor to witness something they teach come to life. Especially something as simple as the greeting, "Good morning, church." A phrase that wasn't initially embraced by all people. I have watched the two congregations I have served live the reality of those words, that the people are the church. not the brick and mortar. We are the church, and nothing can stop us from living our faith. How about you? As you reflect upon this past year, I invite you to, yes, grieve what has been lost, but to also look for God's presence among the challenges and the blessings, however small, which surround us. Those are the moments we hold on to when it seems like this will never end and we will never gather again together. Spoiler alert, we will. I leave you with the words that I shared with you 365 days ago, words written by Martin Luther 500 years ago as he faced a plague of his own. I will admit they sound a bit different 1 year later. Luther wrote, and I quote, "I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it. I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order not to become contaminated, and thus perchance infect and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. If God should wish to take me, God will surely find me, and I have done what God has expected of me. And so I am not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. If my neighbor needs me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely, as stated above." See, this is such a God-fearing faith that it is neither brash nor foolhardy, and does not tempt God. Be safe, church, and do not lose heart. Get the vaccine when you can, wear a mask, and continue to take precautions. We will be together soon, even if it's in the parking lot when spring and summer finally arrive in Michigan. Until then, may God's blessings continue to be with us all, even the ones we didn't expect and maybe didn't embrace when they arrived. Let the church say, Amen.